being Wally pipped by the guy from the newspaper. I don't think.
No.
No. For instance, he can say ESPN Tucson instead of ESPN Radio when he comes out of a break.
Yes.
Unlike this guy. So that's good. Coming up later in the show, the Chicago Sun-Times' Patrick Finley will join us. We will talk about the NFL draft, why April is Liars Month, and why the NFL insists on forcing things down our respective throats. Funny story about Patrick Finley, Stacey.
He's mad at you, isn't he?
He's mad at me. He is the only guest who is allowed to text four-letter words to me because the plan was that he was going to come on at 5:18 my time, and at 5:18 Chicago time, he texts me and goes, "Where are you?" And I go, talking to Steve Walker. And he goes, we're supposed to do our thing. I said, it's 5:18 my time. He goes, okay. I go, is 7:18 your time okay? And he goes, yeah, I'll make it work. It's fine. Now, here's the deal. I know his schedule. He's not doing anything at 7:20 on a Friday night. If he's doing anything, if this is one of the 7 days in the month of April when Chicago is warm enough to go outside, he'll have the barbecue on and a drink in his hand at 7:20 or 7:18 on a Friday. And yet this guy is busting my chops like I'm not stressed out enough, Stacey, trying to host a radio show.
Wait, hey, in defense of Pat?
No, there's no defending.
He's got to prepare for the big NFL draft next week, that Chicago Bears, which he covers.
When you win 5 games a year, the NFL draft is quite literally your Super Bowl.
Whoa. They've been winning 5 games a year?
4?
3?
3? Yeah, that's true. That's true. When you cover a bad team, the NFL draft is your postseason. So maybe that's it. But Patrick Finley will join us here at 5:18 p.m. Coming up next, we will talk to Mike Ferrin he is the Diamondbacks pre- and post-game show host. We'll talk about the D-backs series with the Dodgers starting tonight. In fact, Mike will join us at 4:18, and then 6 o'clock, we kick it to his pregame show, Taijuan Walker on the hill as the Diamondbacks take on the Dodgers tonight. Stacey, let's talk about the D-backs here for a minute.
Do we have to?
Yes.
Okay.
Every time they pull me in, they get so close. They get so close. They do the little things, Stacey. The little things. I watched Taijuan Walker pitch on Easter Sunday against the Dodgers. He looked fantastic. You look at somebody like a Robbie Ray, who I think might be the most underrated pitcher in baseball. You see the way they dismantled San Diego, was it Tuesday night, in an 11-2 victory, where at the end the Padres were pitching their shortstop because they were tired of getting embarrassed by the Diamondbacks. And you sit there and you go, this could be a really good playoff contending team. In fact, I spent most of our Wednesday show yelling and screaming just that this is a team that, with the Giants getting older and older and the Rockies playing at Coors Field and the Padres actively tanking, that this was a team that I thought could really press the Dodgers in the National League West. And what do the Diamondbacks do? Well, that night they lose to somebody named Ulysse Chassin.
1-0.
1-0. Zach Greinke pitches his tail off and loses because he surrenders a home run to the Padres' worst player, Eric Ibar. And then last night, in a somewhat not must-win, but it'd be nice if you could win game to close out the series and their road trip, the Diamondbacks lose to Clayton Richard, who they could have had last August when he was designated for assignment by the Cubs. Somebody who is fine, maybe a 5-starter on most teams. In San Diego, he's the 2. Clayton Richard just sticks it to him, and the Diamondbacks score 1 run. In fact, at the time when I was talking them up 48 hours ago, they led Major League Baseball in runs.
Yeah. Now they're 4th.
Now they don't. 1 run the last 2 days against a Padres pitching staff that is not good. And now you got to face the Dodgers again.
Now, here's something that you didn't know before you started hosting the show.
Yes.
Anytime we praise a team or predict a team will win or do well, the complete opposite happens. So whenever you predicted that, hey, the Diamondbacks are going to do well, they're going to win these games, the complete opposite happens.
And let me tell you why I'm still a little bit intrigued. And we can use tonight's pitcher, Taijuan Walker, as an example. The Diamondbacks, I actually think, have made a lot of pretty good moves of late, trading sort of proven veterans, guys who you kind of know what you're getting, and they're not going to give you much. Aaron Hill goes away. They trade Gene Segura during the offseason. They're unloading even somebody like Beef Castillo. They get rid of, they just kind of let him walk to the Baltimore Orioles in favor of guys who are kind of younger, and this is a baseball term that'll drive you crazy, Stacy. Toolsy. Okay? They are very toolsy as a team.
Okay.
Nick Ahmed is as good a fielding shortstop as there is in baseball. Jake Lamb is a guy who, if he could just be consistent, maybe one of the best hitting infielders in all of baseball. Paul Goldschmidt is baseball Jesus up in Phoenix. A.J. Pollock, when he's healthy, is fantastic. And then you have Taijuan Walker. And Taijuan Walker will pitch tonight when the Diamondbacks face the Dodgers at 6:40 at Chase Field. This is a guy who's like 6'5", 225. Looks like a tight end pitching, right? Throws free and easy 95, 96 miles an hour. Has as many strikeouts as innings pitched this year. So 1 strikeout per inning, pretty good. Somebody who for years has been touted as kind of the next big thing. First with the Seattle Mariners, and as of this year with the Arizona Diamondbacks. He is compelling as hell to watch. When you turn on your TV or listen to Greg Schulte tonight on the radio call. This is a pitcher who is very interesting and worth your time. Promise and inconsistency, and promise and inconsistency. And I'm starting to see a little bit of that in these sort of early 2017 Diamondbacks. They will look great one night and horrible the next. Mm-hmm. They will split a very good Dodgers team in LA, come to San Diego, hang 11 runs on the Padres, and then score 1 in the next 2 days combined. And not because they had it stuck to them by Clayton Kershaw and Madison Bumgarner. We're talking Ulysses Chassin and Clayton Richard. This is a team that if they can figure it out and get consistent, and that is always the last, I think, step before a team becomes truly great. If they could just become a little bit more consistent throughout the course of the summer, I think they can still be one of those really good teams. But it is going to require somebody like a Taijuan Walker to step up and be sort of the guy every outing. Zach Greinke, who was inconsistent last year, looks to be consistently pretty darn good right now. Their closer, Fernando Rodney, has been inconsistent. Tom Wilhelmsen, a guy who us in Tucson, we all root for, a Tucson high guy with the greatest name in sport, or greatest nickname in sports. You know this? Tom Wilhelmsen's nickname, the bartender. And you know why?
Because he used to bartend.
Because he used to bartend. That's all it is. Number 54, Tom Wilhelmsen. Even Tom Wilhelmsen has struggled a little bit. If the veteran guys can be more consistent, and if some of these young guys, the Taijuan Walkers, the Jake Lambs of the world can step up just a little bit. Chris Drury is a guy who a lot of teams would love to have, another good infielder with power. The Diamondbacks could be really, really fun to watch, Stacy. As of right now, they're just not there.
Well, they're not. And you talk about these guys like Drury, Ahmed, Owings, and stuff. But defensively, they're struggling. Yeah. Second most errors, second worst fielding percentage in the majors. Mm-hmm. It's not going to cost you every game, but my gosh, there's a couple of games that they could have won. Runs that they could have prevented just by making a play. Right. I get errors happen. It's a part of the game. But by limiting those, you limit the opportunities your opponents have.
Sure.
And it's cost them. Sure.
Well, and it's funny, defense is the new power, kind of. Is there are ways to measure defense now in the last 5-6 years that actually says that having a good defensive outfielder is almost as important, if not more important, than having a guy who can hit 30 home runs a year. Take the case of the Padres last year. They had Matt Kemp in left field, the guy who finished in the top 5 in the National League in home runs, hit 30 home runs. Mm-hmm. But if you look at wins above replacement and the different things that you use to measure how sort of truly well-rounded a player is, when they traded him and replaced him with a rookie who could cover some ground in the outfield defensively, they measured out to be about worth the same. Okay? Mm-hmm. Worth roughly the same, which is 0. The problem with the Diamondbacks, I think, and one of the issues that they must address if they are going to truly go for it this season, is they have too many guys playing out of position. This is a team that has Yasmani Tomas, who is on a good day a bad fielder, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. He's a designated hitter playing left field. for the Diamondbacks. They have him there. They chose to start the season with Chris Owings at shortstop instead of Nick Ahmed. Some injuries and other issues have moved Owings to partial outfield time, which is, he's a fine outfielder, but he's sort of a light hitting infielder playing the outfield. Chris Owings is playing out of position. Their catcher spot has been, I think, rather inconsistent to start the year. You're going with sort of a Jeff Mathis, Chris Herman platoon, which has been fine. And again, you look at guys like, Jake Lamb is an okay fielder.
But is that a situation where, like, your catcher should you have kept a Castillo?
Possible. Possible.
I know he's not the greatest at calling games, behind home plate. But he
could hit.
Offensively, he could give you some power. He could get you some runs. And he was, somewhat consistent.
I think it was an allocation of funds situation where if you're going to keep Wellington Castillo on a long-term deal, you're going to have to commit something like $10 million a year to him. And maybe that's money they thought they could better spend taking on a contract of a Taijuan Walker or going and picking up sort of another bullpen piece. I mean, Fernando Rodney came over relatively cheaply, and he's their new closer, and Tom Wilhelmsen signed a minor league deal. This is a team that has, I think, enough pitching depth right now to really leverage that and maybe somebody like a Yasmani Tomas to get somebody who can be your prototypical everyday left fielder, to maybe go get somebody who can play shortstop if you've decided that Nick Ahmed's defense isn't enough to keep him in your lineup, to go get somebody who can maybe fatten up the back end of your rotation a little bit. This team is not far off, and the pieces that they are missing are pieces that you can go get for pennies on the dollar at the All-Star break or at the trade deadline if that's what you choose to do. If this team is, frankly, Stacy, a left fielder and maybe a more rounded shortstop and maybe a bullpen guy away, you can go get those guys. I mean, you can go get Houston Street if he's healthy at the deadline, a guy in a walk year who's making a little bit of money, who's not going to be pitching for a good team. I mean, closers are there for the taking at the deadline, as are left fielders. So much has been made of Ryan Braun to the Dodgers. Well, bring him to Phoenix. He'll hit 40 home runs and field okay.
But are you willing to bring in a guy like Ryan Braun, who's obviously had his issues in the past?
Okay.
Are you willing to sacrifice that? And what do you have left to give up, really? Are you willing to give up Owings or Drury to go get a guy like that?
Maybe give up an Archie Bradley.
Your farm system is depleted as is.
But this is a team, though, that, they've gone from very old to on the youngish side. A lot of their most compelling players are still relatively young guys. Taijuan Walker being one of them. Yes, Fernando Rodney is ancient as their closer. Paul Goldschmidt's not getting any younger, even though in my mind he'll always be 24. He's still very good. But this is a team that I think is built to win now. In fact, their minor league system is so bad that they kind of have no other choice unless you want to trade either Paul Goldschmidt or A.J. Pollock. And that, I think, was sort of the implied threat before the season, which was if this team was going to go out and be mediocre, well, shoot, they could trade Pollock or Goldschmidt and restock their farm system right away, and maybe they'd still be mediocre without those guys. I think that we've seen enough out of them early on. They are 10-7, nearly 3 weeks into the start of the season. We'll know a lot more after they play 3 with the Dodgers and 3 with the Padres here this weekend and into next week. But they have enough talent there, I think, Stacy, that if they want to make a move, they can make a move. And, maybe that means sending Yasmani Tomas to the American League for somebody who might be a little bit more well-rounded. Maybe that means taking on another $15 million in payroll to float Ryan Braun this year. Maybe it means simply swallowing hard and trading either Archie Bradley or Patrick Corbin, one of your young arms, for somebody who's a little bit more consistent. This team is not far off. They are prone to, as we saw the last couple of nights, some maddening inconsistency. But they have enough there, Stacy, that if you squint just a little bit, I think you can see the makings of a National League West champion.
Yeah, I'm interested with the Tomas. How much do you think they would really be able to get for him? Last night he had a couple opportunities with runners on base, coming up to the bat. didn't produce. You know, there have been games earlier this year where he has produced, and he's gone 4 for 5. How much do you think you could really get for a guy like that?
I think it would be a bad contract for bad contract, kind of a trade. But at what point is he sort of addition by subtraction? Not saying that he's a bad hitter. He's certainly not. He's somebody who, we saw last year was a 30 home run guy.
He's hitting 283 right now.
283.
But his on-base percentage is 324.
Right. So he doesn't walk. And we know he doesn't defend. He's due to make $13 million. He is making more money than Madison Bumgarner over the next 3 years. $13 million next year, $15 million after that, $17 million the year after that. So whoever would take on Yasmani Tomas's contract would be on the hook for $45 million that you are paying a guy who needs to DH. So we're thinking American League team with a contract to shed. I think that there are some of those out there. I also think somebody like Ryan Braun, maybe you could trade Tomas to the Brewers, bad contract for bad contract, take on some of Braun's deal and call it good. I'm not sure. There's plenty more to talk about throughout the afternoon. Stacy, this is ESPN Tucson, 1490, 104.9 FM. We'll be right back. Arizona coming home tonight following a 4-6 road trip. The Diamondbacks and Taijuan Walker will take on the Dodgers at 6:40. Mike, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Mike, I'm looking at this road trip and think so encouraging until those last two games against the Padres. Do the Diamondbacks come home today a little bit wondering what might have been, do you think?
Maybe. I mean, you got to remember those bottom of the majors in terms of record. Feel like you have a chance, and I think you have to especially give some credit to Jhoulys Chacín and the way he pitched 2 nights ago against Zach Greinke. I thought he was brilliant. Mm-hmm. You know, yesterday they had some opportunities, they just couldn't capitalize. You know, when the game was still tight, mm-hmm. and you know, I think it's probably disappointing. I mean, I think the offense, and certainly over those 10 days on the road trip, didn't perform as well as they did the first week at Chase Field. But a 4-6 10-game road trip isn't the end of the world. You would have loved it to have been 500 or 6-4 if you could have been, but I don't necessarily think that in and of itself is terrible. In that, you know, anytime you go out on the road in the division for 10 games, if you can win 4 out of them, you've done okay.
Sure. You know, the Padres rotation is kind of a punchline around baseball, but both Chacín mm-hmm. and Clayton Richard have really good out pitches. You know, Chacín's slider was biting the other day, really, I think, fooling Diamondbacks hitters, and Clayton Richard kind of has this new slinging arm motion that leads to nice run, really solid ground ball pitcher. These two guys might have been a little bit better than advertised too.
Well, I mean, I think Chacín certainly was on that night. You know, I think you make a good point on Richard. That is not the way Clayton Richard used to look, right? I mean, I saw a lot of Clayton Richard in the National League West, and this kind of, I don't know, I guess you would call it Bumgarner-ish delivery that he has now, where he's kind of this low 3/4 and slinger. You're right. I mean, he gets good run on his pitches. I don't think that he had, you know, any single pitch last night that was maybe as good as what Chacín's slider was the other night. But I also think, you know, these guys have been in the big leagues for a long time. You know, Chacín was actually kind of competent for the Angels last year, and I think the same could be said, you know, a couple months he spent with the D-backs in 15. So, you know, these are guys that can go out, you know, once a month and pitch a ball game like that, and I think it just so happened, and I really think, especially in the case of Chacín, that it happened, you know, up against Greinke. And, you know, I think, you know, it very easily could have happened a week before or a week later, and it just kind of happened to the D-backs in both regards.
Well, and isn't that what makes baseball sort of great and heartbreaking at the same time? Is Zach
right.
Greinke pitches tremendously and gets taken deep by Eric Ibar, of all people, and gets out-pitched by Jhoulys
Who owns him.
Who
right?
owns him,
like
yes.
Eric Ibar's like a 360 hitter in his career against Greinke, right? Who knew?
Right. You're right. Looking ahead to tonight, Mike Ferrin here, Diamondbacks pre- and post-game show host, and you'll be listening to Mike starting at 6 o'clock here on ESPN Tucson. Mike, tonight's game, Taijuan Walker takes the slab again. I thought he looked really good Easter Sunday against the Dodgers. He is somebody who certainly looks the part. His numbers this year have been good. You know, he's 2-1 with a 3.94 ERA, averaging exactly 1 strikeout per inning. What does he have to do to take that next step, and how will he try to attack a very good Dodgers lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I think we certainly saw flashes in spring training of what Taijuan Walker could become. And I think it's just a matter of finding consistency. You know, the one thing about Walker when the D-backs acquired him this winter is it's very difficult to find, you know, what at that point 24-year-old starting pitchers with 350 innings in the big leagues and a 3-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, right? And I know he had the one start where the walks are a little bit of an issue so far this year, so it skews his numbers a bit. But I think when you've got a strike thrower who has premium stuff, I think it's just about experience and kind of being left alone in that role. I'm with you. I thought he pitched great on Sunday. You know, he may have stayed in that game a little longer if not for both game situations and the fact that he was dealing with a little bit of back tightness. But I expect he can go out and do the same thing tonight. And I know Los Angeles is much better against left-handed pitching than they are against righties, but if you have a quality starter on the mound, and that's certainly what Walker is, I certainly think it gives the D-backs a good chance to win anytime he's going to take the ball. And I think he's a guy that you certainly could see progress into being a special pitcher by the end of the year. There's enough there. You've seen more than flashes, right? It's not quite all the way consistent there, but you see it for enough stretches of time that you go, it's getting really close. And I wouldn't be surprised as if you get into the summer months that you really start to see it click and come together over the final, say, 4 months of the season for Walker this year, if not sooner.
Right. And one of the things to me that's so encouraging about Taijuan Walker, Mike, is that he has been, I think, sort of self-correcting on the mound. You know, they were talking on Sunday on the television broadcast. He was sort of making an effort to turn his hips just a little bit more in that start than he had been doing previously. That they thought it gave him a little bit more whip and a little bit more on his fastball. The fact that he at that age is doing that mid-game because he's sensing things getting out of whack, I think that portends really well for improvement down the road this season.
Yeah, and I think fairly early on in that mechanical change, too, because he didn't add that little turn until the beginning of September last year. So I think that's the other part of it, is that's a relative infancy in baseball terms, right? I mean, you're talking about 9 starts maybe total that he's done it. But you're right. I mean, I think that speaks to the maturity of the player. I think it speaks to, what his confidence level. I'll draw a parallel a little bit with Shelby Miller, if I can. Shelby last year got out of whack mechanically and could not find it, could not get back. Now you see those couple of pitches where Shelby looks like he's spinning off and he just doesn't look right. Mm-hmm. And within a pitch or two, he's back into his delivery. And I think that's one of those learning progressions that every player has, is how do I get back as quickly as possible? What are the tricks that I need to learn to get me back on track? And I think that, for Taijuan, he started to get those tools last year when he was in Seattle. It's ironic, it's former D-backs pitching coach Mel Stottlemyre Jr. that helped him with that. And I think there's a chance that is the case, that now that he knows when he's just a little bit off, he can get back into it.
Absolutely. It seems like everything is a mile or two faster than it should be.
It's a great question. And actually, yes, it is. And here's why. Mm-hmm. So for years, for the last decade, when you followed games on Game Day on MLB.com, you may have noticed that you've used the PitchFX data, basically, which Sport Vision runs. Well, Major League Baseball's contract with Sport Vision ran out at the end of last year. Now that they have this player tracking system in every ballpark called StatCast, which tracks every movement of every player and the exit velocity of every ball that's hit and the angle at which the barrel basically hits the ball, all of these things, right? They are using the TrackMan data. Well, what happens is that TrackMan is a Doppler radar system, right, and it takes the ball, the highest velocity of the pitch in flight, which is generally when it releases from the hand. Whereas PitchFX was a camera-based system, so it, in essence, took the flight of the ball from 55 feet. So you're right. Everything does seem a little bit hotter because it is, because the way that they're quantifying the information is different. Now, you'll see some good sites like brooksbaseball.net here so that it's the same or as close to the same as the PitchFX data we've had for the last decade is. So you have to do a little bit of searching if you want to do some more research. But you're right. Just from a casual look, it does look like everything is up a tick. And that's in part because of the different way that they're measuring it.
Sure, and it's so funny. Everybody coming out of everybody's bullpen now is hitting 98 on the gun. And maybe a year ago it was 95, 96.
But, that's been one of the trends anyway over the last decade, right, is that everybody throws 95, 96 miles an hour. And I remember us going through this, 15 years ago when radar guns were starting to become more and more prevalent in game broadcasts. For years, scouts had used guns that were not particularly accurate, but they were more used to judge the speed at the front of the plate as opposed to from the release point, and you saw a little bit of bump there. Now, all that said, at the same time, pitchers now are bigger, stronger, and throw significantly harder than they did 25 or 30 years ago. But you do have to recalibrate your eyes a little bit in some of this.
Absolutely. Mike Ferrin is the pregame and postgame show host for the Arizona Diamondbacks Radio Network, and Mike will be on at 6 p.m. when we are done tonight. Mike, I could talk baseball with you all day, but apparently we have advertisers, and I'm getting a high sign from a producer. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon.
Anytime. I love talking ball.
Great. Thank you. Mike Ferrin, wasn't he great? I really, really like him. A very smart baseball mind. When we come back, we will talk more baseball, why Madison Bumgarner dirt biking is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That and more here on ESPN Tucson, 1490, 104.9 FM. ESPN Tucson, 1490, 104.9 FM. This is the Zach Clark Show. I am not Zach Clark. Ryan Finley, sports editor of the Arizona Daily Star, filling in for Zach while he gets married. Tomorrow is the big day. Stacey, are you a groomsman or like me, are you just going to be there in a suit?
I was shut down. I asked. I was offended that I was not asked to be a part of the bridal party. I know, seriously.
And yet, despite the
if
drama,
anybody, I should be a part of it.
And yet, despite the drama, you will be there tomorrow. You will swallow your
Perhaps.
pride. Swallow your pride. Well, are you bringing Mrs. Stacey tomorrow? It's gonna be a nice evening out.
You mean my better half?
Your better half?
Absolutely.
Excellent. That is wonderful. Well, Zach Clark is getting married. Perhaps we will ask our guest in the 5 o'clock hour, Patrick Finley of the Chicago Sun-Times, if he has any marriage advice for Zach Clark. Knowing Patrick Finley just a little bit, his advice will probably be don't leave the rings in the hotel room like Patrick did when he got married a few years ago. Mike Ferrin was our guest in our last segment. He was fantastic, talking about the Diamondbacks who host the Dodgers tonight. We've got Robert on the line, wants to talk about Diamondbacks. Robert, what up, man?
Not too much. I enjoy your show.
Thank you.
Comment on the Diamondbacks. I don't understand this Lovello, the way he bats. That to me, these guys have played 3 weeks of the season already, and he's already starting to rest them too often, switching the lineup. I think that's why they're not winning right now. They're not hitting the ball because baseball is all about timing and playing day in and day out.
Robert, thank you so much for the call. It's a valid point. You know, some managers early in the season love tinkering. They base things off of matchups and obviously lefty-righty who hits certain pitches well. But to tweak every day, especially when you're winning, Stacey, and I'm sure that's Robert's concern was, Torey Lovello was messing with this lineup when they had just split in Los Angeles. I think had won something like 4 out of 5 and were in first place in the National League West.
I don't know if it's necessarily that he's tinkering with it. Mm-hmm. Starting to rest guys.
Yeah.
We're only 3 weeks into the season here.
Right.
And starting to rest guys. I get what Robert was saying, baseball, a lot of timing, a lot of, just consistently being out there, getting into the rhythm of games.
Right.
I don't know why 3 weeks in you would need to start giving guys rest,
Mm-hmm.
And you have a relatively young team that they're young,
Right.
They got energy to go out there every day.
And it's not like travel's been a problem. I mean, you've gone from Phoenix to San Francisco to LA to San Diego.
Yes.
I mean, that's not exactly a cross-country trip.
Now, I will say, yes, they haven't had a whole lot of days off yet.
Right. Correct.
So, I mean, they played opening day,
right,
had opening day off, and basically played consistently since then.
True.
So they haven't had a lot of time off. So I understand maybe wanting to give a couple of guys a day off, but I mean, every day it seems like somebody's getting a day of rest.
Sure. Could be worse, though. Their best pitcher could have been riding a dirt bike and have hurt his shoulder. That's the big news in sports today is Madison Bumgarner, the Giants ace, apparently decided to go dirt biking while his team was in Colorado, crashed, injured his ribs and his shoulder, and has been put on the 10-day disabled list. Giants can't catch a break. I mean, Bruce Bochy, I believe, is coming back tonight. So he had missed the previous series after undergoing heart surgery. They had to sign B.J. Upton, a.k.a. Melvin Upton Jr., to a minor league deal a couple of weeks ago because their left fielders were 0 for the season.
Wow.
Jarrett Parker, one of their promising young players, and on the Giants, if you're under the age of 42, you're a promising young player, broke his collarbone running headfirst into a wall. This is a team where I know it's early, but if any team can look and go, the baseball gods are out to get us, it's the San Francisco Giants. And if you look at today's injury with Madison Bumgarner, that is yet another thing. Stacey, can I share a couple of fun baseball injuries with you? Because we're talking about wacky stuff. If the Bumgarner injury you would like to think was rare, but like we talked about in hour one.
Was also, I think you left out an important player there, Buster Posey.
Buster Posey.
Diamondbacks took him out for a few games here.
Sure. Threw at his head, took him out, as the Diamondbacks are wont to do. This is weird baseball injuries happen. Clint Barmas, we talked about in hour one, broke his collarbone carrying deer meat upstairs. Wade Boggs hurt his back putting on cowboy boots, which is great. Adam Eaton stabbed himself in the stomach while trying to open a CD with a knife. Kevin Mitchell strained a muscle while vomiting. Joel Zumaya, do you remember this guy? This guy was a big deal for like a week and a half. Pitched for the Tigers, threw like 103. And this was like 10 years ago when throwing 100 was a huge deal. He hurt his wrist playing Guitar Hero and was never really the same. There are guys who have hurt themselves sneezing. Ricky Henderson once took himself out of the lineup in August with frostbite. Now, I don't want to say Cleveland A's, and it was August, and he took himself out of the lineup with frostbite.
He could have sat in the ice bath a bit too long. That's my only thought.
Possible. I mean, there are just wacky injuries. Wacky injuries in baseball, if you hang around enough dudes, and that's what baseball is, right, Stacey? It's 25 men in a room slightly bigger than our studio, and you expect them to not beat the hell out of each other or set each other's feet on fire or whatever it would be, pranks. It's hard enough going through a regular baseball season trying not to get hurt and staying healthy. But doing something stupid like riding your dirt bike when your team is in last place, when you have not been pitching particularly well, when your contract, if it doesn't explicitly forbid it, it should, that is just all-time stupid from a guy in an organization that, frankly, I expect better things of. I mean, this isn't like, the Giants are the class of the National League right now. The Chicago had a do not do stupid stuff off the field thing. You know what this reminds me of, Stacey? It's like 15 years ago, I believe this week. Jeff Kent, who played for the San Francisco Giants, claimed to have injured himself while washing his truck. You ever hear this story?
No.
Said that he injured himself while washing his truck. As it turns out, there are about 20 witnesses who saw him screwing around on a motorcycle and fall, possibly while drinking. And that was how he ended up hurting himself. So lots of baseball to talk about today, both stupid injury talk and Arizona Diamondbacks talk. When we come back, we will shift gears a little bit, talk about the NFL, some NBA playoffs, and what else you will be watching this weekend. This is ESPN Tucson, 1490, 1049 FM. ESPN Tucson, 1490, 1049 FM. This is the Zach Clark Show. I am Ryan Finley, sports editor of the Arizona Daily Star. I'll be filling in for Zach Clark while he gets married. Big day is tomorrow for Zach. And Stacy, you and I were wondering in hour one, what would his wedding song be? There's lots of good ones, man. You had suggested "Take My Breath Away," which I liked.
Yeah, it was
if they didn't have one.
We were talking Top Gun, so
yes. And by the way, we can continue talking Top Gun.
No, we're done.
Dang,
we're done.
Dang. So next segment we'll talk Days of Thunder, and that no,
oh, gosh,
no.
Days
of Thunder makes Top Gun look like what? What's the great movie with Rosebud? Citizen Kane. Days of Thunder makes Top Gun look like Citizen Kane. Days of Thunder is a terrible movie. Terrible.
As is Cocktail, as is a majority of movies Tom Cruise did back
then. Okay. Now you're dragging me into this, kicking and screaming. The Top Gun, Cocktail, and Dirty Dancing soundtracks. Okay.
What?
Hold on. As a child, I believe my mom had those three on steady rotation in the minivan for like 3 years.
Your mom had it on rotation, or you and Patrick had it
on
rotation?
I was like 8. But I seem to remember that. And so it's funny. It's, even something like Dirty Dancing, it's a movie I've never seen all the way through.
Really?
I'm pretty proud of that. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you. By the way, that is another movie that we watched as children. Tell me if I'm wrong. There's awful adult things going on in that movie. And yet, as kids, I believe like my little sister was taken to see it in the theaters. Very, very strange. Anyway, but I can name any song off those soundtracks in 3 beats or less. It's just crazy. Last segment we were talking about Madison Bumgarner and his stupid injury. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about a serious injury here, or at least an injury not suffered on a dirt bike. Rajon Rondo, apparently every time he gets inches away from earning everybody's respect and love, something bad has to happen to him. Chicago Bulls announced today that Rajon Rondo has broken his thumb and is out indefinitely, which is not going to help them as they try to put away the Boston Celtics in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs here. In fact, right now, just before halftime, the Celtics lead the Bulls 42-32. Rondo is a guy who somehow does not have a friend in the league, despite being a very, very good basketball player.
Oh.
No? Am I wrong?
No, no.
You think he's bad?
Yeah, he's not good. I think he is one of the most overrated players in the NBA.
Really?
Yes. Not a fan of his. He can't shoot beyond 2 feet from the rim. He's a decent ball handler, not the greatest. Not a great defender, just sort of average there. And he's a decent facilitator. I think he gets all this love because he was part of those Celtics teams with, Garnett and Pierce and Allen and, that big three that won a title there.
Yeah, but at least he's a good teammate. At least he's a good teammate.
I'm sorry, what?
At least he's a good teammate and he's coachable. It's the coachability of Rajon Rondo
that allows him to stay in the league.
But he's a guy who, and maybe what you say about him is the thing that little Timmy told Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the movie Airplane. My daddy says you don't try until it's the playoffs, and certainly that seems to be part of the thing with Rondo, and in part that's what makes this injury to me so really unfortunate. Is he was kind of starting to feel it a little bit, and he's one of those guys. Say what you will about him as a person, and we've just said a lot. Mm-hmm. He's fearless. And if you're going to try to take down the Boston Celtics in the first round of the NBA playoffs, and if you're going to try to eventually unseat the Cleveland Cavaliers just to get to the NBA Finals, and I'm extrapolating out here, you need a guy who ain't afraid of no ghost, and he's not.
No, I'll give you that he's not afraid, but I don't think any player in the NBA is afraid. I don't think anybody's afraid to go up against anybody.
Right.
That being said, the Chicago Bulls aren't going anywhere. They might beat the Boston Celtics here now that Rondo's out. Highly unlikely. but they're not going anywhere. They're going to lose in the next round.
The fact that the Bulls made the playoffs is somewhat shoved Dwayne Wade and what they're paying Dwayne Wade is one of those things that just makes no sense to me. I know he's local, but he doesn't make your team younger or better. You look at some of the players that they've surrounded him with.
I think they might have felt he could kind of teach Butler, hey, here's how you get to the playoffs. Here's how you win in the postseason.
Possible, but I mean, they trade Gibson, who I thought was a very good player for them at the deadline. He went to, I believe, was it Oklahoma City? Traded him to Oklahoma City at the deadline. They didn't get anything back for him.
No.
You've got Rondo, you've got Wade. I mean, if it's 2009, you're pretty happy about your team. As it is now, the fact that they simply made the playoffs, much less are making it tough on the Celtics, I think, is impressive. But you just think, though, that losing your point guard and maybe your most fearless player, you have a feeling that this is all going to fall apart on them pretty quickly.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, are they better off not making the playoffs? No. Get a higher draft pick and start rebuilding your team.
And this is hell for a professional sports team, especially in a league with a draft, to be just good enough to keep trying every year and just bad enough to not be a contender. It leaves you forever mired in the middle of the round draft pick, never getting any better, basically stuck with your wheels spinning.
Leaves you a Sun.
You're the Suns. When we come back, we'll talk more about the Arizona Wildcats. Patrick Finley from the Chicago Sun-Times will join us. ESPN Tucson, 1490 AM, 1049 FM.